Today, excited to be joined by Hannah Kaiser, who writes for Yahoo Sports, covers the game nationally. You can follow her at Hannah R. Kaiser and also check out her podcast, Time to Hop on the Bandwagon. There you go. Oh, wow.
We were just recording it. We finished recording at 1:10, so I just left the whole setup the way we had it.
No, we're loving it. And while we jump in here, so tell me what you just recorded. So what's coming up next on the latest episode?
Okay, so we actually talked about something that I'm gonna double dip and talk about with you guys, which is the broader question of team construction and whether or not we prefer, as fans, as media, as baseball consumers, for teams to sort of try consistently and be disappointed sometimes. Or to embrace this kind of boom and bust tank and rebuild model where you sort of push all your chips in when you think it is your quote unquote window.
Okay, so let me actually follow up on that. It's one of our favorite topics. I'm always, Hannah, fascinated by the personalities and decisions by ownership to balance profit versus winning and how they intertwine. Some seem to really get it. You have all kinds of philosophies, and it's interesting to me. So do you still think that tanking is healthy and useful? Or, I mean, we know for the sport, it's terrible, right?
Yes.
It is awful. You lose a generation of fans. Guaranteed. You're not interested in the Orioles for 6 years in Baltimore. You wiped out a certain fan base that from 8 to 14 doesn't give a shit about the Orioles, and they'll never have that same kind of love. So is it worth it?
So I think there's a really interesting thing that happened, which is there was the high profile example of the Cubs and the Astros, and it seemed to pay off in this totally predictable way. And it begat a little bit of a mini generation of teams trying that, but it simply can't work for all of them. It's a zero-sum game. It's a closed system. Some teams are going to target a certain year in the future that they just aren't going to win because some other team targeted that year as well. And I think there's this been a little bit of a counter movement to it. The Rays model in a way, and the Dodgers model when you have money, to give your team as many chances at the postseason as possible. But what's interesting to me is the way that people have reacted to the Mets and Padres, most of all, this idea of well, don't you want them to try even if it doesn't work? That is the opposite of the tank and rebuild, is the try every year, but still only 12 teams or however many teams they expand the postseason to are going to make the postseason. So somebody's going to end up disappointed. I think disappointment among fan bases is the sign of a healthy sports league. You should have as many teams disappointed, or as many fan bases disappointed on the first day of the postseason as possible, because that means all those teams gave their fans hope at the outset and hope for as long as possible. But what's interesting is that's kind of what we have now that we have the expanded postseason, and it feeling oh, now it's killed the trade deadline. All these teams think they're in it, but they're actually just mediocre. So I don't really know. What do you guys think? What would you prefer as a fan base? This kind of sometimes you think they're going to contend and they don't, or exactly when they're going to contend, but there are these long fallow periods of, if not tanking, then certainly pulling back, not trying as hard.
I want teams that try. I don't want teams that are, because it doesn't work for every team. And every team says, oh, we're going to do this because of what the Cubs did first and then the Astros did after. And I think that's the problem, is it worked for two teams.
Yes.
And the Cubs won, and now they've kind of gone back, and then now they're trying to do it again, right? So they went back down to horrible, and now they're trying to work their way back up. Whereas the Astros have been better about kind of maintaining where they're at, which I like better. As a fan, I don't want my team to go into the season and say, oh, we're going to lose on purpose. Yeah. Why? Because 7 years from now, we're going to have a chance at it. Screw that, because why am I wasting my money? And you're not going to, so you're telling me you're not trying, you're not spending the money I'm giving you. So why would I want to give you money? And that's kind of what the Astros went through before they won. The Cubs are the Cubs, and they'll always draw. But you look at, again, we keep going back to this. Look at the White Sox. They tanked. And they're supposed to be in their window. Well, their window is 12 games under 500, and the fans are pissed. They're like, we haven't fired the GM, we haven't fired the president, we've tried managers, the same players, and we still suck. So it doesn't work. So I'd rather have a team. Heck, I give the Rays all the credit in the world. They don't have the big money, but they do try every year.
Right.
They try to push it in. and other teams have done this. In Oakland for years, they didn't have the payroll. They pushed and said, hey, we're going to figure this out and figure out how to get in the postseason. Maybe we'll get lucky. But at least they're trying, and I hate the teams that don't try.
This, in some ways, this came out of, I mean, this is something I've been sort of like thinking about for a really long time, but this came out of, I had a conversation with somebody at the commissioner's office recently, and we were just kind of shooting the shit. And I made the point that I bet that every president of baseball operations or GM or whomever at the top of the executive chart of that team, everyone thinks they're going to win more games in 3 years than they are now. It feels like a lot of executives have kind of bought into this logical fallacy that wins in the future are in some ways more easily guaranteed than wins in the present. But you're all going to be there then. It's all just going to be baseball again. You're all going to be subject to the same whims of injuries and underperformance and that kind of thing. And every other team in the league now, it's when the Cubs did it, when the Astros did it, not everyone was planning for the future in the same way. Now, you're not the only team that thinks like, you know what we'll do? We'll take this year off and then we'll just guarantee ourselves a window of contention in the future. You can't do that. Everybody's trying to build a great farm system, have great player development, win in the future, hang on to their prospects. You can't just hang on to your prospects nowadays and trust that you're going to be the only organization that's prepared come the future.
Yeah, and I live outside of Philadelphia, and it's the process for the Sixers has ruined basketball for my kids because I stopped watching, and so they don't follow the Sixers. They're slowly getting into it now because they're trying to win. And so in baseball, like, I don't have a baseball team because I've been to all of them, but it's like you can't, like, it's okay to say, you know what? We pushed all in. We tried to win. It didn't work. And you know what else we did? We slowly improved our farm system. Yeah. Trying to win doesn't deplete your farm system. Making dumb trades, signing dumb free agents, spending too much money where there's no value is asinine. And so it's okay to be like, hey, you know what? I gave it my best in my 4 years as a GM. It just didn't work out.
Totally. And I think the preciousness that GMs, I think, have about high-level prospects is incompatible with just the predictability of like players making that jump from AAA to the majors. Trade some of them for the now. Like, honestly, I think the Mets, they should have moved some of their prospects at the deadline last year. They won 101 games. They were in the last year of having Jacob deGrom. Max Scherzer's only getting older. Like, they were too focused in some ways, even though they are the team that spent all this money, they were in some ways too focused on, well, we got to be good in 5 years too. Why not just be good now? In 5 years, you'll have a whole new set of prospects. You can trade them. There'll be new free agents. You can spend the money then.
Anna, you know why? And Eric too. You want to know why GMs want to tank? Because if they go to their owner and say, we're going to lose for the next 4 years, guess who they don't fire?
Them.
The GM. Yeah. Because they're thinking, well, man, we tried. Oh, now we're going to tank. So guess what? I get to do another rebuild, and I get to keep my multi-million-dollar job for 4 or 5 more years. So if I'm a GM and I take a run and we lose, and then I go to my owner and say, oh, we'll just start over. Give me 4 or 5 years to rebuild it.
Yeah.
Guess what? I keep my job. So
right.
That's a great plan. If I'm a
GM,
it's
a 7-year plan. Yeah,
exactly. I got a 12-year plan. We'll see you in 2020, 2200, whatever it is. You know, 75 years from now, dude. I will be good then. That's the best plan. No, it is, but that's what GMs think.